Welcome to One on One with the Grim One. I am your host, the Slayer of Posers, the most electrifying man in corpse entertainment, the Necrosexual. And joining me on this morbid talk, we have Josh from Defeated Sanity. How the hell are you, Josh?
I'm doing well, man. How about you?
Today is actually a very, very special day for the Necrosexual because it is my grandmother's 90th birthday. And,
oh, hell yeah.
Yes, and she's still alive, I should add, which is also important.
That's even better.
Yes, but it's her 90th birthday, and what a better way to celebrate Bridget's 90th birthday bash than talking about one of her favorite bands, Circle of Dead Children. This is one-on-one with the Grim One, so that means that my guest each week selects one album that has a special dark place in their hearts, and in my grandmother's heart's one of her favorite records that she likes to play. So Josh, tell us about why you selected this record for this talk.
Okay, so there are multiple reasons why I selected this album and this band in particular. Personally, I think that Circle of Dead Children is one of the most criminally underappreciated bands in the death metal underground. I know some people might consider them grind, but to me they are very much death metal and also grind at the same time. So death grind, I guess you could call them. But this album in particular is the pinnacle of their work, I think. And it also is kind of I would say it is the album that really pulled me into the underground death metal scene when I was really young. I think I was in middle school, probably like 13 maybe when I heard this.
Wow, 13 years old. What a ripe age to pop your heavy metal heart on.
Yeah.
For a band like Circle of Dead Children.
Yeah. I mean, before I had heard them, I mean, I was into like Cannibal Corpse and stuff like that, but I mean, that would be boring to talk about. I think Circle of Dead Children is more of a fun band to talk about.
And you're right. They're a band that I had heard of, their name and their logo. I remember seeing years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, we're around the same age. And you see bands like Mortician now that they have memes and meme groups that have kind of had a second resurgence of popularity with the internet, whether it's people, posting memes about them or actually getting into their music. But Circle of Children, not so much. They're Circle of Dead Children, I should say.
Yeah.
Because that's the only type of children I want to be around, the Circle of Dead Children.
Yeah, and I mean, it's sad, really, because I mean they haven't been active in years now. I can't remember which year they put out their last record, but it's just sad because they never really accrued a huge following in the underground. I feel like they have a cult following, absolutely, but they never really blew up. I feel like, and Defeated Sanity they were a Willowtip band for their last, I think, 3 albums, and we're on Willowtip as well. So it's kind of funny. I just thought about that.
The circle has come full circle.
Yes.
But just the tip on Willowtip. Yeah. Yeah, it's a shame that they never quite got to the heights that they deserve because they wrote such great melodies.
Yeah. No, truth be told, I would say so, actually. There's some really cool licks on especially this album.
Yes, and in case I forgot to mention, the album we were talking about is Human Harvest by Pittsburgh's own Circle of Dead Children. So take us back there. What was your first impression when you feasted your ears on this auditory assault from the Circle?
So me being a vocalist, and at that point I was a vocalist in my early infancy, and when I heard the vocals for the first time on the first song, A Family Tree to Hang From, I couldn't. I was blown away. I didn't even know stuff like this was possible, and this album, I would say, is one of the starting points of me trying to find my voice as an extreme metal vocalist. And to me, Joe, the vocalist of Circle, his voice is one of the best in all of death metal. And again, I just need to make it so abundantly clear that this band and Joe as a vocalist are criminally underappreciated. So I want people to check this band out, even if they're not active anymore.
Well, hopefully this talk that we have, this is kind of like the inside the actor studios, but for metalheads.
Yeah.
Inside their house and talking about metal albums and not acting. but hopefully this will help us raise the flag of hate for people to learn more from their local metal libraries about the Circle of Dead Children. From one of Death Metal Today's nastiest vocalists, Josh from Defeated Sanity. Yeah, and I noticed when I was
Depends who you
looking,
ask.
yes, when I was doing my research, my preliminary necrosexual research on Circle of Dead Children, I like that their vocalist had in parentheses no inhales or no inhalations. Like
Yeah.
that was a source of great pride to them. But I have to say, the guy has one hell of a range because he has quite a spectrum of shrieks to growls to burps to pig squeals.
Oh, yeah.
To a couple points you can actually hear what he's saying, but mostly it sounds like inhuman, kind of like alien, like pigs being slaughtered.
Totally.
But it's quite a range.
And everything, and all of his registers, everything he does in every register, he does really well. It's not like he went up into the high register and just half-assed it. He has incredible high screams, better than I could ever do. I never even bothered focusing up there personally, but yeah, I mean, he can do it all, and he can do it all extremely well, I think.
It's totally grim. And is it all him? He's the only vocalist?
He's the only vocalist, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I wasn't sure because sometimes you hear some bands that they have like backup vocalists for the high part or the low part, and he was kind of all over the place.
Right. No, it was just him. And I had the pleasure of seeing him live once, and it was absolute insanity.
Some brutal shit comes out of Pittsburgh. Of course, you have Nun Slaughter.
Yeah.
And when I found out that Circle of Dead Children was also from Pittsburgh, I said, oh, of course.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, kind of a dismal place, so that some dismal music comes out of it.
Yeah, it makes for some great metal in those post-industrial cities.
Oh, yeah, totally.
One thing I noticed, or one thing that I heard, what's your opinion on mic cupping?
So, to me, well, it kind of depends. So, for me, I do some of that, but I only do it live. When I was in the studio, it was much just totally kind of bare bones for the new album. But live, I do use it as a technique just to sort of change the tone of the vocal, because it's just because it's when you're playing live, it's sometimes hard to just get so into it, especially if you're playing for like 20 people who are just standing around at a bar or whatever. But for me, it's like if you're trying to do some of those like squealy sort of vocals, which I do some of those in Defeated, it's kind of hard to get those depending on how the front of house guy is EQing the vocal in the house. So one, you kind of don't really know what you sound like a lot of the time. And two, a lot of times I feel like, especially from watching death metal bands with a house front with a front of house guy that's just the house guy, not a touring front of house dude for the band. A lot of times the vocal is very thick sounding, and it's almost, it kind of becomes unintelligible, and any kind of those like shrieky vocals are very hard to come through. So to me, cupping the mic sometimes will help for me to really push that sort of a formant, if you would want to call it that. But I don't know. I don't know about that on the Circle album, because to me it sounds like it was done on because it's so crisp, the vocal on Human Harvest, that it sounds like it was done on a condenser. It sounds very, very open and raw. So, I mean, who knows? Hard to say without having been there. But, yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I think there's a time and a place,
It's time and a place, right? It's got to make sense with the overall psychology of the music. Or, of course, when you're performing live, a lot of the times you can't even hear yourself, which makes it easy to throw your voice out because you're trying to hear yourself in the mix when you're playing, your local basement or dungeon, as the Necrosexual band is prone to do.
Yeah.
And of course, every time you deal with extreme music, you have the purists. There are some people like that guy on Facebook who messages bands and asks if they use any triggers on their albums for the drums.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, death metal isn't a music that ever followed any sort of set of rules, I don't think. And once it does, it's not death metal anymore in heart.
Then it becomes prog, right?
Exactly. But so I think there's a time and a place for everything. Me personally, with mic cupping, I do both. Sometimes I cup the mic if I'm trying to go for that sound live, which, again, for like squealy sort of vocals or just for an effect, But other times I'm much more open with how I hold it. So it kind of depends, and it helps to mix up the sound, and to me it makes the show more exciting to listen to.
Yeah, it's definitely all about how you hold it, if you know what I mean, baby.
Oh yeah.
Shut up. So on that album, do you have a favorite song, one that really speaks to you, one of your personal picks?
Well, I mean, again, the first song has a special place in my heart, A Family Tree to Hang From, because that was the first song I heard from Circle of Dead Children. And it was absolute insanity. But I have to say this whole album is pretty perfect, but I can't pick one favorite song because A Family Tree to Hang From is a great song, Salt Rock Eyes is a great song, Bring Her a Mushroom Cloud, Destiny of a Slug. I could go on and on. This album is amazing.
I guess this is the grindcore influence on it, but the songs are extremely short. It's like 24 minutes total, with a lot of songs crammed in there. So when I listened to it, I prepared for this interview and gave this an old spin while I was playing a very hard level on Doom Eternal in ultra violence mode. So it was like the perfect soundtrack for just like killing demons and totally like just unleashing all sorts of bloodshed and hell. One of the things I noticed was it was just so relentless that all the songs kind of blended together. So it was hard to tell like
it's
where
one of those. It is one of those, very abrupt. Like one song ends, the next one starts. Is almost no.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not looking, you don't know what track number you're on. And sometimes that's cool. When you come to know an album really well, you start to discern
of course
where the breaking points happen. There's a lot of albums like that. I mean, any Disgorge album kind of feels like that.
Yeah.
For people into the brutal death metal underground, Disgorge are God. But it's kind of one of those, they're one of those bands, you know, you have to listen to an album probably like 6 times to really discern each song from the next.
I'll tell you one album that also applied to, and I'm sure you're probably a fan of this band, or maybe you're not, but Demolich.
Oh yeah. I haven't gotten super deep into their music, but they are great. Yeah. It's on my to-do list to really explore their discography.
Yeah, it's a short discography. It's one album. So
I didn't know they only had one album. I thought because they have a huge cult following, I figured they would have more of a discography behind them.
They're another band that, myself included, I really had no idea who they were. The first time I think I heard about them was when they played that Maryland Death Fest a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And there's a whole Finnish scene that I was just overshadowed, you know, in my upbringing. I didn't know people that listened to any bands from Finland, and I think that they were kind of over the Finnish death metal scene was overshadowed by either the black metal that was happening or the death metal that was happening in Sweden. But it was some really zany stuff. Those Finns get really weird, and Demolich is one of those like crowning achievements. The inaccessibility of brutal death metal hasn't turned off a ton of young people from getting into it these days.
Oh yeah, it's it's pretty it's getting popular with younger kids, I would imagine, especially from just from being in a band and being on the road so often. I see a lot of younger people. I say young people as if I'm fucking old, but I see a lot of younger people coming out to the shows, and it's reassuring that, you know, it's not just us like 90s kids and older who are still into this stuff, and it ends there, you know.
Where there's raging hormones, there's going to be death metal fans. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, totally.
I'll tell you one song that I really enjoyed off that album. It was "We Wear the Gimp Mask," or "I Wear the Gimp Mask," because it shows they have a sense of humor and they're also up to date on their movies. So I certainly admire that cinematic homage within that brutal music. Yeah, and vocally, I think in the second song too, he kind of did some scatting where he's like, do da, like it sounds like almost
he does some weird shit. Even on the first song, he does like that. It almost sounds like a monkey.
Right? Like Jonathan Davis from Korn, you wish you could be that brutal.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, at some points, it's like kind of Jonathan Davis, like, dropped down like 3 octaves and just the most extreme that it could possibly be.
I knew it was going to be a brutal album too when I heard the fucking snare tone with that piccolo snare.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful.
Bing.
Beautiful. I love the snare sound on this album. I love the production on this album. It's raw, it's gritty, but it's also very, very clear. So you can hear everything. It's still brutal, but it's nice and crisp. The vocals are very upfront, which I'm actually not super about. But in this scenario, it's perfect because the vocals are just doing so much that they demand so much attention.
Yeah, they really are like a lead instrument in a band
absolutely.
like this, where they're so as guttural and as inhumane sounding and totally brutal as they are. because the guy's range is so all over the place and spastic. I totally get what you mean with the vocal production. There's nothing worse than when you hear a band and the mixing is kind of jarbled and the vocals just kind of sound in the background somewhere. My only complaint really was that I couldn't really hear the bass.
Oh, there is no bass.
There is no bass, so that's why.
That's a funny thing. It's almost as if they compensated for that by pushing the vocal forward so that he's deep most of the time, so it's almost like he is the bass.
I guess that's a grindcore influence. No bass player, also ahead of their time. Nowadays it's super common to see grindcore bands and there's a drummer and just a guitarist. Pretty soon it's going to be grindcore bands. It's going to be a guy playing drums, screaming.
Grind people are the ones who do the craziest shit. I mean, there's that band. What are they called? Chapang.
Yes.
2 drummers. I saw them at Maryland Death Fest. That was absolutely insane. I was very entertained.
2 drummers, following the great tradition of Manowar.
It was like 2 drummers. It was, what was it? It was a crazy, weird lineup. It was like 2 drummers, 2 vocalists, and like a bass player, or 2 bass players and no guitarist, or something crazy like that.
Likewise, in the bass department, I must compliment what I've heard from the new Defeated Sanity record, even though this might not be your area of expertise. It's got super crisp, bouncy bass tone.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there was a lot of care put into that because, the bass has always been important with Defeated Sanity, and I think now this is probably the most audible that the bass has been on a Defeated Sanity album. So Jacob is very happy with that. We all are, because the bass does some really, really great things on this album that you'll actually be able to really hear and discern when everything is going full bore, rather than, you almost don't know that the bass is happening until everything stops and there's a bass fill and you're like, oh, there's a fucking bass. Cool. Onward.
What did you do when you were a teenager and you heard Circle of Dead Children for the first time? You mentioned that it was sort of what initiated you on this journey to become an extreme vocalist. So, how did you hone those pipes? Because it's not like something you can be classically trained to make those noises.
Right, yeah. So, me growing up, the way that I kind of taught myself to do vocals was finding my favorite vocalists and just trying to sound like them. So, just basically building a big palette of sounds that I wanted to kind of put into my own library, if you will. So for me, it all started with Chris Barnes, really, because, Chris Barnes is the father of death metal vocals as far as I'm concerned, as far as the deep guttural stuff. Tomb of the Mutilated is one of, if not the best death metal vocals or death metal vocal performances ever. And then this one just took that and just ripped it to shreds and put it all over the place, mixed up the register, put in all kinds of different techniques, the pig squeals. That was probably my introduction to pig squeals, was this album as well. So this just kind of took what I thought were death metal vocals and just introduced me to so many different timbres and possibilities that you could potentially do with your voice and still kind of deliver in a way that keeps you in the death metal ball field, I guess you could say, because death metal is very vast, I would say, these days.
Yes.
So it started out with me just kind of trying to reach those lows that I was hearing, particularly with this album, and also just practicing those weird fucking techniques and figuring out how he does the stuff. And over the course of years of practicing and figuring out how other people do things, and then also figuring out what my voice does naturally, I came to what I have contributed to Defeated Sanity.
And this is your first album with Defeated Sanity. What can we expect when we hear it?
I think it's a pretty wild album for Defeated Sanity. That's saying something. Some people will love it, some people will think it's their favorite album, and some people will hate it and say Psalms of the Moribund or bust, basically. And that's what it boils down to. But we're all very excited. We're all extremely proud of this album. Lilith is convinced that this is some of the best music he's ever written in his life, and I would have to agree with him, because it's for people who appreciate complex music, there's a lot to explore with this album, and then for people who just want brutality, there's also a lot to explore. So I think 90 to 99% of Defeated fans and beyond will be happy with this album.
They will be defeated by the riffs. Just give up on guitar. Don't even bother.
Yeah.
In a lot of the ways, you have the easiest part of the band because you don't need to worry about any of the crazy like riff writing or time signatures. But on the other side, you have to come up with all the vocals and really scream your fucking head off.
Yeah, I mean, especially with Defeated, and the thing with this album is that we wanted vocals that were going to be very rhythmically not dominant, but they were actually contributing to the overall rhythmic scheme of the song. They weren't just following anything at any given time. So there's a lot of points where the vocal is actually what's kind of holding the grounded rhythm together, but also at the same time, still trying to stay pretty guttural. As far as vocals go in brutal death metal, some people might be turned off by my performance because it's just not super gurgly the whole time, which some people, that's all they want, and that's not me. I do that stuff throughout the album here and there where I thought it was appropriate and where it added to the music rather than just gurgling my way through the whole album. So that's just my take on it. I love death metal vocals. I love powerful death metal vocals, and that's just what I wanted to deliver with Defeated Sanity. So I guess people just have to listen and find out.
Yes, well, definitely sounds like you have the power from what I've heard from the one single you guys have released off the Sanguinary Impetus, coming soon on Willowtip Records. Totally brutal shit. And you're the new kid on the block, so congratulations to joining the ranks of the Defeated Sanity guys. Are they based in Germany still?
So right now we're a three-piece. We don't have a permanent guitarist right now. Our old guitarist Christian left the band a little over a year ago now. And Jake, so Lille still lives in Berlin. He's the only one still living in Germany. Jacob, who did live in Berlin recently, probably like 2 or 3 years ago now, moved to LA. So he's actually not too far from me. I live north in Washington. So yeah, 2/3 American now and 1/3 German.
What was that like for you when you were across continents?
So, I mean, the music had been getting work. So Lily writes all the music. For the most part, he writes just about everything. And essentially, Jacob built his bass parts off of that, based off going on video chat and also tabs. And then for the vocals, which that's the only part of the creative process I can really speak about from personal experience, is me and Lily actually collaborated on all the vocal parts, all the lyrics on the whole album. So we met at least once a week for probably a year and a half or 2 straight when we weren't on tour to work on lyrics and vocal parts. So it was a lot of work over the course of between 1 and 2 years, and it was totally collaborative. So essentially, so the concept of the album was talked about a long time ago. The concept of this album is about, there's no human element to this album. It's entirely about the animal kingdom. So that concept Lily brought to the table a long time ago, and then we sort of decided what each song was going to be about, and he would come up with ideas, and me being the native English speaker would basically take a lot of his ideas and turn them into lyrics. And then he would have a lot of concrete vocal patterns in mind that he wanted to really be solidified in the music, and we would work with that stuff, and also I would come up with some vocal parts as well. But it was just really interesting to work together that way. And we would work kind of switching between video chats over the course of months, and then also working on it at the practice space when we were about to go on tour, things like that. So it was a very flexible writing process, I guess you could say.
Sounds of the Animal Kingdom, brought to you by Defeated Sanity. Sounds totally brutal. I love it. You got to think outside the box, and it sounds like you definitely have.
Yeah, we did on this one. I implore everybody to read the lyrics and follow along, because they are there.
I've always enjoyed death metal lyrics or death metal vocalists that sound evil and heavy, but also being able to tell what they're saying if they can write good lyrics.
Totally.
You have bands like Obituary that have great vocals, and then you read the lyrics and they're like third grade reading level.
Yeah, no, I mean a lot of, and I will be the first to tell you, a lot of death metal vocal or a lot of death metal lyrics are laughably kind of elementary, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, some of them are pretty hysterical. But no, we put a lot of thought and a lot of energy into these, and it's almost like a game that we're playing with the fans who actually will read the lyrics because we know they're very few and far between. So we almost want people to like guess at which animal or which creature each song is about, because everyone has a very concrete subject. So we'll see. We're trying not to give too much away at the forefront until the album comes out.
Does it straight up reveal, like, or do you kind of have to do some like
Not really.
detective work to
Yeah,
kind
no,
of?
we don't really. We named the songs in a way that are um, kind of I don't know. They're obscure, but once you know what it's about, everything comes together and it all makes sense. It's all based off the lyrics, and the song titles all come from the lyrics. And yeah, I mean, it's obscure in ways, but once you figure it out and read them again, you can really kind of paint you can go through. It's a whole narrative. It's a whole story about each creature essentially. So once you figure out what it is and you read them again, it all becomes very clear.
It sounds like the death metal version of Wild Discovery. Once you finally connect the pieces.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what it is to a degree. I mean, we did a lot of research into what we wanted to include in the album, and then we also put a lot of effort while writing to make it not feel like a Wikipedia article, and that ended up becoming sort of a thing we would say to each other. Is one of us would send a set of lyrics and be like, "Oh no, that's too National Geographic," or "That's too Wikipedia." We got to like make it a little more. You have to read between the lines a little bit more.
Jazz it up a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And one other thing I gotta say that I enjoyed learning about Defeated Sanity is that it had started off as a father-son project
It did, yeah.
between the drummer Lily and his late father, and I guess that his dad was a jazz drummer in the 1970s. So
Yeah.
it's just funny to think about that because you normally don't associate this sort of twisted, insane death metal with being a German jazz drummer in the 1970s. But I guess that's German engineering for you at its finest.
And I mean, I think especially people who know the roots of Defeated Sanity can pick out those influences in Defeated Sanity's music today. Because I mean, there's a lot of jazz influence in Defeated Sanity's music, particularly in the drumming. You'll hear it in a lot of the drum patterns that Lily chooses. A lot of it is not very typical death metal drumming. Besides blast beats, there has to be some of those, but he tries to he mixes things up and he does things in a way that I don't think any other death metal drummer could ever pull off. So he has his own stamp of individuality with Defeated Sanity, no doubt.
Individual thought patterns on drums.
Yeah.
A little bit of jazz. Thank you so much for going one-on-one with the Grim One to talk about my grandmother's favorite album, Human Harvest by Circle of Dead Children. I'm going to go have a jazz cigarette myself. So this has been another Dispatch with the Necrosexual. Hey, check out Defeated Sanity, the Sanguinary Impetus coming soon on Willowtip Records. I will see you in hell.